Happy Pi Day, Westchester. It is Friday, March 14th, 2025, and I'm Bonita with the Westchester Chronicle. On Wednesday, March 5th, Representative Chrissy Houlahan hosted a joint town hall focusing on the current litigation and the Trump administration. Representative Houlahan was joined by Representative Mary Gay Scanlon of Congressional District 5, Representative Madeline Dean of Congressional District 4, Representative Joe Neguse of Colorado's 2nd Congressional District, and Professor David Vladeck, Constitutional Law Professor at Georgetown University. The town hall began with an introduction of the guests and a question that has been posed to the representatives from thousands of constituents across Southeast Pennsylvania. What are the Democrats doing in response to the current actions taken by the president? Representative Dean answered with the following.
This is not normal, what we are going through. This is turbulence. I know many offices have been hosting events like this, mine included, and what my team and I have heard literally from hundreds and hundreds of Pennsylvanians is fear and anxiety. We're hearing concerns about Trump's slew of overreaching, sometimes blatantly illegal executive orders, empowering of Elon Musk, gutting federal agencies, levying huge tariffs on our allies, cutting off aid to Ukraine, the list goes on. In addition to concerns, we've heard questions, mainly what are Democrats doing? Right now, we're working on, I call it 3 pillars or 3 pathways to tackling these challenging times: litigation, legislation, and mobilization. Litigation, and you're going to hear quite a bit about that tonight. The power of the courts to make sure that the rule of law, the separation of powers, is upheld. Legislation, that's us, the power of Congress. Importantly, in this setting, the power of Congress to use oversight to dig into what is going on, what is right, what is wrong, what is an overreach. And finally, all of us, you on the line, mobilization. That's where people come in. Engaged civic response, good questions, which I know we will get plenty of, but an engaged citizenry is actually what is going to help us through this challenging time.
The town hall then turned to Representative Neguse, who is the chair of the Litigation and Rapid Response Task Force. It was created as a hub to respond to the agency actions and executive orders that have been enacted by the president. Representative Houlahan is the current lead on the national security matters within the task force. Her position helps in understanding the consequences and implications for national security in regards to the current actions by the president. There are currently over 100 cases pending in court regarding the agency actions and executive orders. If you would like to learn more about any of the current cases, there are websites listed in the description below that will help you out. Representative Scanlon then turned the event over to Professor Vladeck to take questions in regards to the current litigation. The first questions that were provided focused on who exactly are filing the lawsuits and who is paying for them. It was noted that members of Congress cannot file lawsuits challenging administrative actions. Professor Vladeck responded that many of the lawsuits are being filed by state attorney generals, unions representing federal workers who have been discharged unlawfully, and interest groups representing companies that were assisting the U.S. Agency of International Development, or USAID. As for who is funding the cases, nonprofit public interest organizations such as the Public Citizen Litigation Group and Democracy Forward have been raising funds via donations to fund the litigation. Follow-up questions focused on the actual topics of the cases. What are these organizations suing the federal government for?
So there are lots of cases about DOJ. There are lots of cases about mass firing of federal workers who have civil service protection. There are attacks on agencies like AID, the CFPB, the National Institutes of Health, the Food and Drug Administration, the Education Department, and there are a bunch of cases involving the firing of commissioners or other top officials. The Office of Special Counsel, a commissioner of the EEOC, a commissioner of the National Labor Relations Board, and others, high-level personnel who had tenure. That is, they could only be fired if they did something wrong. But the day that President Trump was confirmed, he fired all of these people. And those cases are in the courts as well. So it's hard to imagine any case involving the federal government that isn't in litigation.
Another series of questions ask about the power of the executive and legislative branches. Residents had concerns about the president's supposed power to reallocate or even suspend funds that had already been assigned to agencies by Congress. Professor Vladeck stated that there are already measures in place, specifically the Impoundment Control Act, to allow the president to work with Congress in regards to the federal budget.
There's nothing in the Constitution that says the president has the power of stopping to appropriate money. And so after the Nixon case, Congress enacted something called the Impoundment Control Act, which gave them essentially real authority to force a president to spend money that he or she doesn't want to spend, but Congress did. And you know, the power under the Impoundment Control Act, when it was originally passed, was based on either a one-house or two-house veto. And in the Chadha case, the Supreme Court said legislative veto is not constitutional. But then Congress redrafted the Impoundment Control Act to give the president two options. One is they could ask Congress to repeal all of the appropriation. That's called the rescission. Congress has to do that. Both houses of Congress have to agree. That's not happening here. Then there's another theory that the Impoundment Control Act, which allows a president to defer spending, but he's got to spend. He can have a few months if he goes to Congress and says, look, I want to slow down spending on this package or something like that. He has the authority to go ask Congress. He doesn't have the authority to do this on his own. Congress is the one that does all of the work on appropriations. And so, you know, your constituents are exactly right. Congress is the one that has the power of the purse, not the president.
The last batch of questions focus on the creation of DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. What it is, what they're doing, is what they're doing legal, and who exactly is leading it. There have been much discussion on what exactly Elon Musk's role is in the department. There is still much confusion about where DOGE stands as a government entity. Because the Department of Government Efficiency is not considered a government agency, it is not bound by Freedom of Information Act requests.
And increasingly, the judges are getting very concerned about Musk's role, particularly since, you know, he wants to tear down all of the agencies that he's had quarrels with.
Right, and that seems to be, I mean, it kind of goes to the fundamental separation of power and how you have oversight and how you get transparency into what's going on with DOGE and Musk and everything.
The town hall came to a close with a call to action from all of the representatives. If you feel that the current presidential actions have affected you or a loved one personally, share your stories. Contact your representatives. They are available to speak with you about any of your concerns. If you would like to listen to the town hall in its entirety, you can find it at houlahan.house.gov. Bringing it over to local government, Westchester is made up of 7 wards, each with their own elected councilperson. These elected council members make up the Westchester Borough Council, and they make the laws here in the borough. They also pass the budget and generally oversee how the borough is run. But it wasn't always that way. For most of the history of Westchester, council members were elected at large. So how did it change to the current ward system? Why did it change? our editor Kyle Hudson sat down with Sam Stretton, the lawyer who changed the way our government is structured, and spoke to him about how and why it happened.
I've always believed as an attorney that lawyers are the oil that makes democracy work. And so I've been always involved from the legal side in our government and politics, and also from the political side. When I came out to Chester County, I got very involved in politics because I realized that you can make changes and you could easily get involved. It's easy to get on the ballot, and if you work hard, you'll win elections. Even though I had been active with Democrats out in central Pennsylvania, I and a lot of my friends re-registered Republican when we came back. And then we formed something called the Republican Study Group. And we took on Bill Meehan, who was then the party head, Republican party head, and we elected Charlie Doherty, state senator, and then we elected him to Congress. And Jerry McKelvey, we elected Joe Rocks, and helped Phil Price get elected. These are all Republican senators. And we were off and running. And I became Charlie Doherty's election lawyer. And in fact, in 1980, we tried to take over the Republican Party. We slated like 700 committee people. And I was in election court for like 12 weeks. I lost almost every case. Later, I found out why, because Bill Meehan was a smart guy. I got to be good friends with him later. The judge they had, Stanley Greenberg, was ruling against us. I didn't know at the time, but Bill Meehan got him his pardon from Nixon when he was convicted of, I forget what it was, felonies. And so Bill and he were pretty close. But, you learn that, but in politics, today's enemies, tomorrow's friends, you got to always remember that, or you won't go very far in politics. My wife had graduated from medical school, and I helped her to get a job out here. So I moved out here, kept a Philadelphia office. I helped Buddy become a judge in Philly. He's retired now, but he was one of the best judges down in Philadelphia. So I came out here and started working with the Republican Party. We rebuilt the Young Republicans. I mentored and worked closely with a young man named Alan Novak, and we were doing pretty well. My office was down the street at 301 South High Street. In 1985, 3 men and a woman walked into my office. It was Wilma Ford, Charles Melton, Norman Bond, and W.T.M. Johnson. Some of the best people I've ever met in my life. And they told me stories of racism in Westchester I wasn't even aware of because I came from Philly. When I came out here, I thought, geez, what a liberal community this is. It is Underground Railroad history, Quaker heritage, because I was totally wrong. I didn't know what I was talking about. So I listened to them, and they told me how they weren't in the black community in those days in the east side of Westchester, Second Ward, and some of the surrounding had a very strong presence. And Mr. Melton had run 3 times for council, always winning big in the black community, but he couldn't win at large because the white community would uniformly vote against him. In fact, back then in the 80s, 6 of the 7 council people were from the First Ward, as was the mayor. First Ward's in the northeastern side of town, where I live. And that was where the money was. They showed me how they wouldn't pick up their trash. They wouldn't plow the streets in the black community. You could only go to the hospital if you're black if you went in the basement. They showed me the union rooms, where a lot of the schools had union rooms where in the basement they had black children 1 through 8th grade, while the white children were upstairs, going to different classes, as a normal thing. Mr. Melton broke that. And how no blacks could serve on the fire boards, that the Klan had an office at 10 North Church Street. And then the history of the Klan, how Chester County, particularly in the 40s and 50s, had been one of the strongholds nationwide for the Klan. And I realized what I was dealing with. So we developed a plan. We decided to attack the election first. And Chester County, Westchester being the county seat, we said, let's make it a ward system so we can always have community involvement, which I thought would be great because it was hard to win at large. But, in a ward, you can win if you want to work. And also to have allow the Hispanic community, which was growing then, and the Black community, which was about 35%, they could always elect someone if they wanted to, like in the 2nd Ward, in the 6th Ward, because there was enough Black population to do that if they got organized. So we filed a lawsuit in 1985, 1986, alleging 150 years of voter discrimination. All hell broke loose when I filed that suit. And I remember walking out the street, white people would spit at me. I lost almost every white client. They took their business. You can get an idea what it was like in Westchester. I worked very closely with Charles Melton, who was a hero of mine, Dr. Johnson, who is a wonderfully brilliant man, a chemist at Lincoln at the time and later at Penn, and someone who worked very, very hard for human rights, involved in protest and everything. He's, all these people are being forgotten now. It's a shame. But we filed the suit. And as a result of that, I tried the case. It was a lengthy trial in 86 and 87 before President Judge John Stively, who was a wonderful judge, an old-fashioned judge. He was against us originally. In fact, he told me, Sam, withdraw this. But I told him, just wait. And we convinced him. We had the help of Mr. we did it all pro bono, but Mr. D. Baptiste, who then became mayor later, helped to finance it, helped us to get money for experts, for depositions, and things of that nature. Steve Hansel, who was then active in the borough school board and borough council, I used as a witness, and then Andy Dinneman, before he was commissioner and before he was state senator, he was a history professor at Westchester. I used him as one of my history experts, and we tried the case, and it was incredible. I remember the testimony. I remember one time in court, I was sitting next to Mr. Melton, and I said, "Can you believe this testimony?" A lot of white citizens were up there, how much they loved the Black community, but it was their fault that the Blacks were too stupid or too lazy to, win in politics. Of course, it was a joke that they said that, but they did. That was 1987. Some of the people, as I mentioned earlier, Dr. Johnson, Mr. Melton, Charles Melton, Mr. Bond, were amazing people. Dr. Johnson is a chemist. He fought the discrimination at Lincoln, and then later became a great chemist at Penn. At the same time, fighting for the rights of the steel workers up in Coatesville and down here, the ward system. These were men who stood up and devoted their whole lives to change, and now are being forgotten. Norman Bond, an electrician by trade, and a repairman, he stood up and fought. And Charles Melton broke the color line with sports. Took over the Melton Center, which was really, in those days, it's a shadow of itself now, but in those days was like the YMCA for Black people, because Black people weren't allowed to join the YMCA. In fact, in Chester County, they used to have a day where you would join, you would have you would go in, and the Black people could go to the YMCA, then they would close it down to scrub it so the white people wouldn't be contaminated. So for the Black people being there, it gives you an idea of what it used to be like in Chester County and not that long ago. Mr. Melton, I had seen him like August 1st or 2nd because I was running for DA then, and for the Democratic ticket, and we had a fundraiser. In fact, I had to carry him up the stairs of the fire company so he could be there with me. But I have a picture of him and I think it might be the last picture of him alive. I only met Mr. Rustin, I think, once through Mr. Melton and Dr. Johnson, but I didn't really know Bernard Rustin. But he was very supportive, of course, what we were doing. And I got a call in late August from Mr. Melton's doctor, who was chairman of the Pennsylvania NAACP. And he said to me, Sam, Mr. Melton is dying. I don't think he's going to last more than another day. And his dying, he was at Brandywine Hospital, and his dying wish is to know what the decision of the ward system was, because he had fought so hard for it. So, somewhat unorthodox, but I called Judge Stively, who I knew because I tried many cases before him. Judge Stively had been the DA in Chester County at one point. I said, Judge, I don't want to know anything about the case till you issue your decision, but Mr. Melton is dying and would like to know. Would you go and talk to him? And you know what Judge Stively did? One of the most wonderful things. It just shows you what judges used to be like. As soon as he got off the phone with me, he walked out of the courthouse, drove up to Brandywine, where Mr. Melton was, and talked to him. I then called the doctor that late afternoon because I wanted to find out what happened. I can't think of the doctor's name either. I could see him. Dr. Butler. How could I forget Dr. Butler? He was a character, but also chairman of the NAACP statewide. So I called Dr. Butler and said, well, what happened? He said, well, the judge came. We all said hello to him. And then he went in to see Scats. That was Melton's halfback name when he played for Zimmy Zimmerman at Henderson. That was Eleanor Taylor's father, was the football coach. As the first and only black athlete in Chester County, Mr. Ruskin might have been the second. And so he went in and talked to Scats. And I said, yeah, and what happened? He said they were there about a half hour, and Judge Stively left. He had tears in his eyes and left. And I said, did you go in and talk to Mr. Melton? And he said, we did. I said, what happened? He said, I walked in. I said, Scats, what happened? What did he say? And he said, Mr. Melton looked at him, tears running down his eyes, the gross, wonderful smile, and then he died. It's a true story. And I was his pallbearer at his funeral a couple days later. And then a couple days later, we won the case. As I told you, I wish Mr. Melton had been here to see it. But he knew because the judge told him. The judge found it's a reported decision, 150 years of voting discrimination. And I'll never forget that afternoon. Hundreds of older black people came to my office just thanking us, tears in their eyes. You had to be there. It was one of the most moving experiences. And then that night, the white mob came, ransacked the office and everything else. You might remember 2 years after, or 3 years after that, the Klan was given permission to march in Westchester. And instead of arresting the Klan, who were doing all kinds of horrible things, they arrested my clients. And I think I tried 100 lawsuits, and we won every one, not guilty. But that was the way the Klan was and the town was in those days. But we won, and it changed things. For the first time, there was elected black representatives who served, for a couple terms. For the first time, blacks were appointed to the fire department. For the first time, they opened up, there was no more discrimination in the hospitals. It was a major thing. Then we tried to address the jury selection process, which in our mind was not very effective. But we didn't have the money to do those challenges properly, so we lost both times. But by doing it, I think we resulted in some changes. And that was the start of things. Dr. Johnson, myself. During that time period, I was a Republican committeeman. And I went to the Republican meeting. And I was half playing with the idea of running for, chairperson. And when I walked in, Republican committeemen, it's 1987, started screaming racial obscenities at me. Get that in-lover out of here and all that. So I walked out, and the next morning walked over to voter services and re-registered Democrat. The Democrats then had me run as a write-in for district attorney against Jim McElry in 1987, and we ran a hard campaign, but we just, it was 10-1 Republican. I only was appointed by the Democrats as chairman of the Westchester Democratic Committee, and in 10 years we made it a Democratic town. It was 10-1, 15-1 Republican. I brought in Bill Scott, who we elected as council person. We knocked off his opponent on the polls, and it was like a new era. And then the Democrats only took council a few years later and have controlled borough council since. But we kept building. I then filed a lawsuit to allow convicted felons to vote because that was a major issue, and we won that in 2000. And in Pennsylvania, it was one of the few states where convicted felons can vote after they've served their prison sentence. And we continued on in issues. In Westchester, I was very active, running the party and doing all the political stuff. With a little help from Donald Trump in 2016 or 17, the Democrats took the county. I'm not always happy with them since. And keep in mind that we became strong Democrats. We wanted a two-party system. We fought the one-party system the Republicans had for 150 years, and we broke it. But we did not want a two-party. We did not want the Democrats to become a one-party system. That's one thing that upsets me in Westchester. And I've asked Republicans, rebuild your party. It can't be still the structure's there, because it was only a few years ago that you have people in every polling place. It's not that big of a gap countywide between Republicans and Democrats. Good, well-financed Republican candidates could win. But that's what you want. You want a competitive system. If I was a little younger, I'd run for councilor, but I got other projects I'm working on. But right now, I just practice law. I'm very active with politics elsewhere. I represent many of the ward leaders in Philadelphia. Out here, when the Democrats need me, I represent them in litigation. Right now, they haven't called on me for quite some time. It's just as you get older, it's the hardest thing about getting older. Besides, the fight of age creeping up on you, it should become irrelevant. That's the most frustrating thing for an old guy like me. But that's all right. The torch has to be passed. And I'm hoping that some of the people I know, like you and others, will take that torch and run with it and do a better job than we did. I learned that, pretty much it's important to do what you really believe in. I was offered some big money when I was a young lawyer to go with some major firms, like a lot of money. And I'd always turned it down. I wanted to be a sole practitioner. I wanted to try cases because I wanted to try to make a difference here and there. Sometimes you make a difference on a big thing, like the ward system. Sometimes it's a bit here and a bit there. And so what I learned is you can do that. I've also learned that you cannot be afraid. You have to stand up to what you believe. And sometimes it costs you your dreams, like, I wanted to be a judge. But so be it. And sometimes you get disappointed. But even the people who turned on me and all that, I met a whole great mass of characters, and they all, the ones that hate me, the ones that like me, they've all enriched me. I've had a great time doing it.
Sam Stretton is still practicing law here in Westchester, and you can find his office on High Street. Now, for those of you who are looking to run for office, but are not interested in running with the Democratic or Republican parties, now is your time to get on the ballot. This Tuesday the 11th was the deadline to submit nomination petitions to get on the ballot for the primary election on May 20th. The 11th was also the start date to begin circulating nomination papers, not petitions, papers. They look something like this. If you would like to run for office as an independent or as any other political party, now is your time to start getting your signatures. Now for nomination papers, you will need to get assistance from the staff at Voter Services to determine the specific number of signatures you need. But don't worry, the deadline to submit your nomination papers is August 8th. You can visit the Voter Services Office at the Government Services Building located at 601 West Town Road or by going to the Voter Services page at chesco.org. You can find out everything you need by clicking the links in the description below. The 2025 municipal primary election will take place on Tuesday, May 20th. This year, May 5th is the deadline to register to vote for the 2025 election. You can register to vote or update your information at vote.pa.gov. It is never too late to register to vote. And as long as you are 18 and have been a resident for at least a year, you will always have the possibility of representing your community. This year in Westchester, we will be voting for Mayor of the Borough, Borough Council representatives for Wards 1, 3, 5, and 7, as well as County Controller, Coroner, Treasurer, and Clerk of Courts. We will provide a link to the full list of offices in the description below. We hope to see you on the ballot. This week, the Westchester University Student Rec Center welcomed young scientists and their families to celebrate their passion for science at the 36th Annual Chester County Science Research Competition. The event was hosted by the Chester County Intermediate Unit and consisted of 2 science fairs for students in grades 6 to 12 and 4 to 5 respectively. Over 350 students from over 50 Chester County schools gathered to present their creative and innovative projects, which spanned a variety of topics including robotics, botany, nutrition, and more. Prize-winning projects in the 6th to 12th grade bracket will be advancing to the Regional Delaware Valley Science Fair in April. A huge congratulations to all the students who participated in this year's competition. And lastly, before we go, we want to wish you all a happy St. Patrick's Day. To those of you who celebrate, please remember to stay safe and celebrate responsibly. We hope you all find a little extra luck this week. As always, we appreciate you tuning in. Thanks to your continued support, our team has grown and we look forward to bringing you even more coverage. With our friends at AllianceBase, we can take our project to the next level. However, in order to keep this show ad-free, we will need your help. If you appreciate what we do, please consider becoming a supporter on Patreon, liking and sharing us on Facebook, and subscribing on YouTube. It's the easiest way to support us and help us bring you the news. And if you'd like to listen to our show via podcast, you can find us on SoundCloud. Real quick though, are you the kind of person who likes to take photos or maybe short videos? We'd like to see Westchester from your point of view. If we use your photo, we'll pay you for it. So why don't you send it to westchesterchronicle@gmail.com. Our program is produced by Crimson Planet Media, recorded at AllianceBase here in downtown Westchester, and our music is by Doug Keller. As always, we want to thank you for your time, and we hope to see you soon. Until then, I'm Bonita with the Westchester Chronicle.